I'm Tapan, and I'm joined by Vani for the session on securing containers, preventing data leaks via log lines. We are very excited to share our insights into security, and we want to inspire from this session on how we can actually create a development environment and the workflow which is more secure when it comes to log lines. Before we get started, I just wanted to set the expectations from our session. So first of all the views and opinions that we share, they are all ours and are not affiliated by our employers, past or present. Secondly, we will be sharing a lot of general practices, best practices, some of the information and solutions as part of the presentation. Everyone is free to use them as per your choice. However, as most of the engineering solutions apply, there are trade-offs for different solutions. So you need to be more diligent in terms of evaluating the solution per your use case and then only apply. So more specifically true for production environment. And lastly, like in terms of solution, so we are here to actually provide a solution around securing the log lines, and we'll cover a variety of solution and an approach to build the solution. So you are free to, apply the approach and build your own in-house solution, or you can actually buy a proprietary solution for it. Now, I want to actually share why we are here and what brought two of us together to give this talk. First of all, both of us have worked in the cybersecurity industry for the last 3-4 years. And as part of our day job, we had been actually creating enterprise scale solutions, which are securing large scale enterprise in terms of their data protection, as well as protecting any kind of data leaks or preventing bad data to come into the network. So as part of our day job, we have learned few insights and we want to share our learning with you. And secondly, we are driven by values. There are two specific values that I want to share. First is simplicity in terms of professional value. For any solution, we want to actually make it simple to share and which is easy to actually bake into an in-house solution and tailor it up to your own use case. And secondly, the second value that I want to share is our commitment to security. So both Vani and I had been actually active bug hunters on Google. Like recently, we actually found few security vulnerability in Google products, particularly in the Google collaborative space. And we have a knack for these kind of things, and we want to share them across to make the digital way of life more secure. Now let me walk you through the timeline for the session for the next 20 minutes or so. First of all, we would want to share the core of the problem statement, which is around the significance of security of the log lines, specifically around when it comes to what kind of data we should be logging and what kind of data we should not be logging, how we should store the logs, how we should actually make them actually travels across the network, basically logs in transit and logs at rest. Then we will actually come to solutioning. We will cover some proactive solutioning, that is the preventive measures, and we'll also come to the reactive measures. Then after, we will cover some of the trade-offs between the two approaches, and you need to decide on the use case basis and the scale of the project or the organization, which solution is best tailored for your. And over the solution casing, we would actually cover some of the capabilities of CASB, which not only covers the security of log lines particularly. CASB is a wider topic, and we will cover it in a nutshell and how it actually works internally. And lastly, of course, like we will be open for any discussion. We will be around during the conference, and if somebody is interested, we'll have an extended talk.
So before we understand the security risks of logging sensitive data and how to secure your log lines, let's learn about Bob's journey, and through his story we'll understand that why is it so important to secure your log lines. So imagine that you work in a fintech startup and your team hires Bob, a budding engineer, to make some changes in the existing data and payments flow. So Bob is just like regular guy, right? Like each one of us. But one important thing that he lacks is the security mindset. So Bob jumps up straight to his assignment, and let's see how Bob does. So Bob is almost done with his changes and he's about to release them to production. And to make sure his changes are working and all of the fields are getting populated, he decides to log them. So he adds, in his logs, he adds credit card numbers, IP addresses, transaction IDs, and some information like that. After all, these are just variables, right? What harm can they do? So with this mindset, Bob pushes them to production, and then let's see what happens. So the next fine day, Bob receives multiple messages and emails from his managers and team members. Now, Bob thought that they might be reaching out to him because he has done such a good job, right? And that on his first assignment, a dream of every new joinee. But to Bob's surprise, because of his log lines that he added, there was a massive data breach and security breach in his organization. So Bob rushes to office, and then he sees that this data breach got discovered due to the central monitoring system that they had in his team. So to deal with this breach, as the first step, Bob jumps out and changes the log lines that he had there, and he completely removes them. But when he went to remove those log lines, he saw that there's not only one, but multiple log lines sitting out there, which can cause security breach next, because they all had some sort of sensitive information, and even some information that like the hackers can do some good with those data, but we don't realize it yet, right? So Bob jumps into this rabbit hole, and but as the rabbit hole deepens, so does his problems. So meanwhile, Bob was, deleting those log lines. His team was doing an impact assessment of the data breach that they had, and realizing that they could face massive legal repercussions and financial damages. The weight of that breach brought down the morale and productivity of the team, because they were all sad. Like, just because of Bob's one change, they had to face this issue. But finally, they acknowledged that overall it was their fault that they all lacked security mindset, and they didn't have good practices when it came to code reviewing and dealing with those long lines. So to prevent these sort of security breaches and data leaks, they decided that they should research about the existing solutions that are there in the market, and also maybe build something in-house. So let's see, what do they research about?
Thanks, Vani, for covering the story around Bob. I'm sure nobody wants to be in the spot where Bob is right now. So let's actually dive deeper into the solutioning. First of all, let me cover what not to do, which is we should not be logging any kind of sensitive information. When it comes to sensitive information, there are different categories of information, whether it could be personal information, it could be financial, health data. There are different categories of information that we categorize them as sensitive. We should never be logging sensitive information at all. Now, per se, the problem is not just logging the sensitive information. The issue happens when there is a security breach. When somebody who who should not have the access, get access to that information and misuse it. So that is where the core impact happens. But before that also, like even if there is no security breach, there are data protection laws in place like GDPR for which organizations need to comply. And if any of these security breach or logging breach happens, organization is in direct violation of such data protection laws, and they need to pay in billions and millions. And it is not just the monetary loss. Overall, the organization actually loses their trust from the customers, their brand value deteriorates, and it is very harmful for the organization overall. Now, when it comes to logging, what happens is log data actually increases the attack surface. When we are logging something, it can be shared across for auditing purposes. Like as developers, when we are troubleshooting, we tend to share some log snippets. So the data is actually being copied in an immutable sense, and that increases the attack surface. You never know where that information is going across. Now, what to do? How to actually make sure that we are logging correctly. So there are 4 pillars that I want to cover, although it is not the entire verbose best practices, but they are, I think, in my opinion, the most important ones. Firstly, as I mentioned, we should have zero tolerance for logging any kind of sensitive information. Secondly, whenever we are storing any kind of data, whether it is personal information, any kind of financial information, we should ensure that we are encrypting it with the right standards, whether we are storing it or it is in transit. Thirdly, whatever access we give for the logs, we should have a process for it, and only the right users should have the access to it. And fourthly, despite all these best practices, there could still be some leaks. So auditing helps us in ensuring that we are actually following all the best practices. And of course, it also helps if there is a third party who is doing auditing, we are doing it proactively. So auditing is also one of the most important pillar in my opinion. Now, why are we talking about logging today specifically for containers? Why it is important for modern applications more than it was for legacy applications? First of all, it was important from day zero, but it is all the more important right now because the way we deploy applications has changed in the last decade or so. Now we are deploying applications through containers. Before the containerization boom happened, we used to deploy on servers, and the logs used to be contained within the server and then exported. There were physical boundaries because there were on-premise infrastructure that actually prevented unauthorized access to those particular logs. However, in today's world, there are centralized solutions for monitoring, and all the telemetry data goes to a centralized system. What happens is these are very convenient, and they have their own merits. However, they also increases the attack surface. When it is very convenient to give access to Grafana, you will give access with lesser security in place. So that is why it is more important today than it was earlier. Then right now we also have more third-party integrations than earlier. Most of the servers, most of the applications, they are dependent on the third-party applications as well. And of course, as I mentioned, organizations need to comply with some data protection laws. And these data protection laws are recently new in the picture, which were not present or not so much stringent 2 decades before. So now over to Vani to actually dive deeper into the solutioning phase.
So talking on the lines of modern applications, the recent trends in the SaaS application growth has shown that it is an ever-growing market with almost 20% of market growth for the next 5 years. And with the early adoption and rise of adoption in the remote work after the pandemic, so the SaaS application usage has increased and skyrocketed from a mere 71% in 2018 to almost 95% just last year. So with this massive adoption, we are just left to wonder that what happens to our data that goes into the SaaS applications and how is it being secured? So talking about data in SaaS applications, currently there are 2 types of data that we generate. The one that we users generate. We generate data in the form of text messages, emails, files that we share with our colleagues when we message on Slack, we send emails on Gmail, we upload our files on AWS, Azure, GCP, Google Drive, and on these file sharing platforms. So the data that we humans generate, it is very unpredictable due to the human nature. But the data, it is hard to predict what sort of data we'll generate. But its scale also depends on the organization that we are part of. Bigger the organization, the more users they'll have, and the data they generate will be, increasing multifold. Also, engineers like us, we write code, right? Which is also a very important piece of data for our organization. So the data and the code that we write. So what do you think, what sort of data do these applications generate that we write on day-to-day basis? Can anybody guess? What sort of data these applications generate that we work on? Yeah, so it's the topic of today. So they generate logs. And logs, on the other hand, even though, like, they are dynamic in nature, but they are predictable because we are the only ones who add these log lines. So if code goes through a particular flow, we can expect the log lines that we would be seeing on the central monitoring system, right? So talking about the data security now. So the data that we generate for SaaS applications, currently it is being secured by CASB, which is Cloud Access Security Broker. In very simpler terms, CASB sits as a third-party broker and secures our data when we access the cloud. So any data that, let's say, if your organization is using CASB right now, so any data that you generate, let's say text messages on Microsoft Teams, or you send any emails or files, all of that is being scanned by CASB. And not only it protects our data, it also makes sure that we are, our organization is complying to the data protection laws that we have in place. And it makes sure that we are protective against any sort of cybersecurity threats. And it also makes sure that it prevents data loss as well. Currently, market leaders like Netscope, Zscaler, Palo Alto Networks have CASB solutions in place. So now we reach to the part where we talk about the proactive solutions to secure your log lines. First and foremost, as Tapan suggested before, that the security mindset of securing logs has 4 pillars. So it is very important that we make sure that these security practices are embedded in our engineering culture. Strict code reviews, auditing in pre-prod environments, these are some of the very important steps to root out and weed out the log lines that may leak sensitive data out there. But along with this, what you can do is, if you have less data complexity, you can create custom loggers. So custom loggers are supported by programming languages such as Java and Python. So using these custom loggers, you can mask the data that comes up. Let's say you accidentally log PAN numbers or credit card numbers. But if you have these rules in place to redact or mask those data based on regular expressions, then you can save yourself from data breaches. I'll show you a demo of how the log lines look when you use a custom logger to log these lines. So as you can see, we have PAN numbers here, but since we use them, we used a utility to log them out, they are coming in a masked form. So even if we accidentally log out these data, we are still safe from any data breach or security breach, because we know that this data is coming out in a masked form. But there is a demerit to proactive approaches, because as and when the data complexity grows, the number of custom logger rules that you might have, it would be growing multifold. And at one time, it gets very difficult to keep a tab on the rules that there are. So in that case, what you can do is you can move towards some reactive approaches, and along with it, it also causes inefficiencies because log lines are real time in nature. But if we go through some custom loggers, so it would hinder that efficient nature of logs, and it would cause some performance penalties.
Thanks, Vani, for covering the proactive approach. Now let me go dive into the reactive approach and why it is very important. So one of the points that Vani raised was CASB is kind of a broker in between that is actually kind of filtering the data. It is actually scanning the data whether there is sensitive information present or not. It may or may not allow and can allow the data to bypass, and it can raise some incidents based on the data policies that are set. Data policies could be, like whether we could have PAN numbers, Aadhaar numbers, it could be social security number. All these are different kinds of data policies, and some of the data policies can be actually created using regular expressions. For example, the PAN number example that Vani mentioned, we can actually create a very simple regex to mask PAN numbers whenever we find such data. But as the data is growing, there is latency involved. And when we depend on a third-party broker, for example, in this case, CASB, there will be more latency. Logging is particularly useful for real-time monitoring, and we want to get the log lines within the same second at least. We cannot afford a latency of few seconds, and then, okay, if there is some data violation, it doesn't come. So the solution that we should have is there could be some kind of proactive solution till a certain extent when the data complexity is within manageable approach. And if it is growing manifold, then we need to switch to the reactive approach in favor of the latency and the performance of the application logs. When it comes to reactive data security, the thing is, I think everyone might agree that reactive is kind of bad, probably in some sense that, okay, something has already happened, now we are fixing the situation. But just bear with me. We can actually make this solution better. And how we can do it is by making it systematical and follow a certain process. We can have it have the reactive approach in an iteration wherein we have a continuous reactive scanning for the logs, and all of this is happening in pre-prod environments and not in the production environments. So your latency particularly matters a lot in production and not that much in non-prod environments. So we can set up a pipeline for logging wherein we are streaming the logs to the CASB solutions for the non-prod environment, and it will create the data incidents. This actually ensures that we are catching all the log lines which are logging sensitive information without creating any latency. And it is kind of it fits very well in this case because the data patterns are dependent on the code. They won't change in the production environment. The values could change, but the regular expression that are actually deciding them will not change. So it is actually a good solution for non-prod environment, but we need to make them continuously, we can integrate them within the CI/CD pipeline, or we can have, depending on the project that you are working on, if it has ad hoc pipeline, we could integrate it there. Let me show a mock example where we have created a mock CASB solution which sits in between the application and the centralized logging solution. So the application is logging PAN numbers just like the earlier example where Vani showed that the PAN numbers are masked. But in this case, the PAN numbers are not masked. Is it visible to everyone? I think it is the resolution, but the in this particular example, is it better now? So it is the similar application which is logging PAN numbers, but it is not following a reactive approach. What it means is it is not masking the PAN numbers, and those PAN numbers will indeed go to a centralized logging solution, for example, Grafana, Splunk, whatever you are using, and people can actually see that, okay, some sensitive information is being logged. However, there is an integrated CASB solution in place, which is monitoring the log lines, and it will generate the incidents like this on over the dashboard. So you can actually monitor that there are data incidents being generated in the non-prod environment, and all the information could be actually logged, that which log line or which application is logging the sensitive information. We can then proactively fix those log lines and prevent any data leaks in the production environment. Now, let me conclude by comparing the two approaches, the proactive and the reactive approach. First of all, as I mentioned, proactive approach is best suitable when the data complexity is slightly manageable. We are just starting off. Anyone doing just a semi-serious project can also build a very simple custom logger. And there are filters, like different programming languages support this kind of concept in different ways. There could be logging filters. You could create a wrapper around the logger, different kind of concepts. But in a nutshell, it is just masking the content based on some regular expression or policies. So proactive approach is good when the data complexity is manageable, and it will catch all the incidents well before any leak happens. However, reactive approach can be implemented in such a way that it is kind of a proactive solution if you see, because it is in a non-prod environment and you are getting the merits of all the proactive solution that we discussed. With that, I would like to conclude our talk, and I hope you guys found this interesting. And our goal was to actually inspire a security mindset, and I hope nobody is going into the position of Bob from tomorrow. We would like to connect with you, and if somebody is interested to discuss more, we are here around, and we will like to chat about it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Vani and Tapan. It was really curiosity-driven session. So now I request Chandra to give away the memento to Vani. We can keep clapping for Vani. Now next we have in line it's Tapan. So I request Chandra to give away memento to Tapan also. Yeah, have a round of applause for Tapan too. Your session really left us much to ponder upon. So thank you so much once again.